Welcome to Pretty Lies and Alibis. Let's seek the truth and travel the long road to justice together. What you know, Alibiers? Welcome to another episode of Pretty Lies and Alibis. I'm Gigi. It's Memorial Day. I know a lot of you guys have the day off, cooking out, having fun in the pool, doing your thing, but also take a minute to reflect on why we have Memorial Day. So many selfless men and women have given their lives for our freedom. And there are a lot of families that are hurting today. It is a solemn day in this country. Tonight at 8 p.m., I will be live on Hidden True Crimes YouTube channel with News Nation's Brian and Alex Capriello. Really excited about that. We're going to be talking Lori Vallow and Bryan Kohberger. So be sure to tune in. I'll put the link out here in just a bit. Music fact of the day. This is interesting because yesterday was, I believe, the 25th anniversary of the murder of Phil Hartman. And that was a domestic violence murder. He was murdered by his wife as he slept in his bed. She, several hours later, committed suicide right beside him with their children in the house, by the way. I did not know this. He was a graphic designer before he really broke into show business. And he designed over 40 record covers for various bands. And some of the most notable designs can be found on the covers of Crosby, Stills and Nash, Poco, America, and Steely Dan albums. I had no clue. When Fruit Loop was on, she gave this statistic that 1 in 9 men would be victims of domestic violence. Although I think that number is probably much higher. There's still a stigma where there shouldn't be about men being victims. I think it's probably very underreported, and 1 in 9 is probably just about as equal to 1 in 4 women, I do think. Speaking of domestic violence, you guys showed up and showed out for The Hiding Place, which is the safe haven that Fruit Loop and her co-founder Bryan have created and have already started housing victims of domestic violence. You guys pretty much bought up the entire Amazon wish list and gave a lot of donations. They were blown away, and I'm so proud of you guys. Thank you so much for choosing to support their cause because, you know, with Phil Hartman, Gabby Petito, how many domestic violence murders have we talked about on this podcast? And what they're doing up there is breaking that cycle, giving men and women the tools emotionally and financially to get out alive, which oftentimes on this podcast is not what we're talking about. I'm so proud of her. And I think it's really, really cool that we started this podcast together. And even though we went our separate ways last July so she could do this, we're still partnering because I want to use this podcast to help them grow their place. And I'm learning from them about domestic violence statistics and things like that. So we're just going to be partners just in a different way. Also, one thing that I do want to kind of talk about is writing a book about the Lori Vallow case. And it's something that I've kind of struggled with as far as should I or should I not. I have a hard time profiting directly off cases. I use advertisers. I don't charge my listeners for content. And at the same time, I feel like I know this case and I really want to create a book based on the Connecting the Dots series, kind of going back in, adding in what we learned from trial, as well as my experiences at her trial and sentencing. So what I decided to do is to write a book. However, I'm going to donate a portion of the proceeds to, and Kay Woodcock tweeted about this, so I'm okay putting it out here, is that they're not anywhere near ready right now, but they do want to start a foundation to honor JJ, Charles, and Tylee. So a portion of the profits will go to that, and a portion of the profits will go to The Hiding Place, Fruit Loop and Bryan's domestic violence safe haven, to further their mission and then to further the foundation eventually that will be set up by Kay and Larry to honor the victims in that. And a portion will go to the Tammy Douglas Daybell Foundation that her family has set up in her honor to put books in the hands of kids because she was very passionate, as we know, about reading. And so I want to give back while also getting the true story of everything we know so far that's happened in this case. So there it is. And I don't know when it's going to happen. I've got to figure out publishers and how to do all this. And so I'm starting literally just Googling things. But I do feel driven, and I feel like if it's something that can help these different foundations to further their mission to help people, then I feel okay doing it. So that's kind of an announcement, I guess. And I don't know when I'll even be close to doing anything like putting anything out there. But I'm just in the very infant stages right now of just getting my notes back together and going through and adding and having to go through essentially every tweet about the trial that had facts in them where I can fill in those gaps is going to be time consuming, but when it is complete, it will be accurate. So there you go. Just insane the last 3.5 years covering this case, and to be able to sit in that trial, law and crime just blew me away with their trust in me with Murdaugh and especially Lori Vallow. So I really appreciate them sending me out there so I could sit and watch justice unfold every day in that courtroom. And I will be at sentencing, so it will be full circle. Cool thing is, Fruit Loop is thinking about trying to come to sentencing with me just to tag along and to show her respects. We want to go to the memorial fence and pay our respects there. So I'm hoping that can happen. And then I'm going to take my kids and we're maybe going to make a Yellowstone trip out of it. So we'll see. Full circle, I think, to see her sentenced to what I think will be multiple life sentences. And in fact, Kay Woodcock replied to a tweet of mine today saying that Lori will turn 50 shortly before her sentencing. And so she couldn't think of a better birthday gift than life in prison for Lori. And I said, well, if I knew I wouldn't get arrested, I'd sing happy birthday, you're screwed. But yeah, I'm gonna keep it classy when I'm there for sentencing. If I can get in, because it's first come, first serve. Now, speaking of Lori Vallow, sentencing will be July 31st at 11 a.m. Eastern, and it will be live streamed. Now, we all know at this point, her attorneys have filed for a new trial. Now, they had 14 days after verdict to do so. This was not unexpected. They had to do this. I mean, this is part of being a defense attorney. But let's go through what they said in their filing. It says that the court may grant a new trial in the following cases only: when the jury has received any evidence out of court other than that resulting from a view of the premises, when the court has misdirected the jury in a matter of law or has erred in the decision of any question of law arising during the course of the trial, when the verdict is contrary to law or evidence, the court misdirected the jury in a matter of law as it related to the jury instructions on conspiracy. The indictment filed by the grand jury on May 25th, 2021 states, wow, we just passed 2 years since they were indicted. It just hit me. 2 years and a few days. It states that the conspiracy is Chad Guy Daybell, Lori Noreen Vallow, and Alex Cox, who is deceased, and other co-conspirators, both known and unknown. This language clearly states that at least 5 people entered into a conspiracy: Chad, Lori, Alex, and other conspirators. The trial court, however, at the government's request, allowed the trial jury to consider a conspiracy of only 2 people, Lori and Chad, Lori and Alex, or Chad and Alex. This change of the definition of conspiracy from the grand jury to the trial jury completely changed the complexity of this case by allowing the insertion of the quote and or end quote language. For the past 2 years, the defense has been put on notice that the conspiracy involved at least 5 people. This notice was clear from the language of the indictment to have the government and the court permit a conspiracy of just 2 people instead of 5 was prejudicial and unlawful and should require a new trial. The court misdirected the jury in a matter of law as it related to the amended indictment. At the close of the evidence in this case, the government moved to amend the indictment 2 years after it was filed by the grand jury for a clerical error. The amendment was not a clerical error, but changed the statute in the definition of grand theft. Repeated attempts by the defense to remand the indictment last year were objected to by the government and denied by the court. The court should have likewise denied the government's request to amend the indictment. Whether the language of the grand theft charge included intent to deprive or intent to deceive was an element of proof to be determined by the trial jury and should not have been amended by the government. Also, a juror interview revealed that the jury instructions were confusing and that he knew of evidence not submitted to the jury. Juror number 8 was interviewed by East Idaho News on May 17th, 2023 in Boise, Idaho. The juror and the reporter were very respectful of the process. Roughly halfway through the interview, an interesting discussion takes place for 2 minutes as follows. The reporter, having seen all the evidence, all the thousands of hours spent, how would you describe the efforts of law enforcement? The juror said, they did a good job with what they had. I don't know that you can ever train for something like this. I think they did a good job with what they had. You question some things that happened. I'm sure there's a reason for it. You question had some things been done differently early on, would any of us be here? The reporter, do you have an example of one of those things? And the juror said, we didn't consider this during our deliberations because it was clear to us the instructions were clear. Arizona evidence and testimony is only for demonstrative purposes. The reporter says, sure, yes. The juror says, we were all very, very respectful of the rule, the directions that were given. But now being removed from that, I think the police department in Phoenix had some significant red flags that had they been followed up on, maybe we're not here. Nate says, do you mean after Charles was shot? And the juror says before and after. The juror's not wrong, by the way. The reporter says before and after. Yes, you're right. Before he was shot with the body cam, and the juror nods affirmative. So Nate moves on to another line of question. This question and answer between the reporter and the juror make clear the evidence permitted under Rule 404B, Idaho Rules of Evidence, is confusing to the jury. The defense continually objected to 404B evidence, and this is a good example why. Arizona evidence and testimony was not for, as the juror stated, and as the reporter agreed, but was evidence to show some other reason other than bad character. The evidence allowed in this case was the summary evidence from the law enforcement witness. To confuse evidence and character evidence is easy to do. Hence, the defense objections should have been sustained. The second problem with this juror's comments are that Charles Vallow's statements to law enforcement were not part of the evidence presented in this case. The juror and the reporter refer to it, but it wasn't presented in court. We can only conclude that the juror relied on information not presented in court to reach his conclusion that Arizona dropped the ball and should have done more, even before Charles Vallow was shot and killed by Alex Cox. The actual recording of this interview can be made available to the court for review. For these reasons, the defense asked that the court vacate the judgment and order a new trial. Oral arguments is requested. I've been on the road covering trials for 12 weeks so far this year, and Base has made my travel so much easier. It's an overpacker's dream. It can be hard to fit everything in, especially when it comes to luggage, but with Base, there's room for everything. Base was created by actress Shay Mitchell to make sleek and affordable bags, luggage, and accessories designed to help you travel effortlessly while still looking fashionable. Base has thought of everything you could ever want in a piece of luggage. 360-degree gliding wheels, a cushion handle, a built-in weight indicator that has saved me from last-minute overweight luggage fees and scrambling to balance weight between my bags. We've all been there. It also has washable bags for your dirty clothes and all the interior pockets you need to keep organized. Their luggage comes in multiple sizes and colors, and for shorter trips, the Weekender bag is super functional. It even has a place to store your shoes separately. I can see why Base has over 30,000 five-star reviews, one of those from me. Right now, Base is offering my listeners 15% off your first purchase by visiting basetravel.com/whattheworld. Go to basetravel.com/whattheworld for 15% off your first purchase. That's Base, BEIS travel.com/whattheworld. Summer is around the corner, and living in the humid South, I find myself wearing less makeup to let my skin breathe easy, but I still want a little coverage. Kosas has me covered, literally. Kosas makes clean makeup for people who take their skincare seriously. Their complexion products are actually proven to make your skin better and are dermatologist tested, safe for sensitive and acne-prone skin, and hypoallergenic. Kosas Revealer Concealer. It's not your mom's concealer. It's super creamy, weightless, and it's a total multitasker. It's a concealer, eye cream, and spot treatment in one. Millions of people have tried Kosas, making it one of the best-selling makeup collections at Sephora. So don't choose between wearing great makeup and taking care of your skin. Right now, Kosas is offering my listeners 15% off your first purchase of $50 or more when you go to kosas.com/whattheworld. Go to Kosas, KOSAS.com/whattheworld for 15% off your first purchase of $50 or more, plus free shipping. That's kosas.com/whattheworld. Now, just a short while ago, right before I started this, Linda Kinney Baden, who is a reporter for Law and Crime and also a former prosecutor and currently a criminal defense attorney, did not know, by the way, her husband is Dr. Baden from, remember that show on HBO? It was like Autopsy. He's a forensic pathologist. Love that guy. Just hit me. I worked with her during Murdoch and Vallow Daybell. Had no clue, but she weighed in on this, and I want to put up what she had to say because I think that it gives a little bit of comfort to people who are freaking out about this. But just remember, they had to file this. They had 14 days to do so. This wasn't unexpected. I was actually surprised it went down to the wire with the filing. Linda Kinney Baden says in a tweet, and I've got this on the screen here, this motion must be made by the defense or they should turn their law licenses into Cracker Jack cookie toys. Let's get beyond that. Only two arguments matter. Now, you can follow Miss Baden, by the way. It's at KENNEYBADEN on Twitter. She says, now let's analyze substance of those two. I'm a former prosecutor, now defense attorney, have handled many high-profile trials, currently host on Law and Crime Network. Defense argument, use of the word by one juror in an interview shows jury confused about the charge. She says, no, in fact, it's quite the opposite. The use of the word is a very insightful layperson description of the 404B rule and how to use it and how not to use it. In my opinion, it shows a deep understanding of the charge, and jurors said the jury followed the judge's instructions. Further, it shows a clear understanding that 404B was not to be character evidence showing that someone committed a crime. Says jury only considered evidence they were told they could. After time passed from verdict, now the juror has clearly read about the case and made decisions. Police could have done more, specifically referring to Charles. The juror says since removed, meaning removed by time, the juror can look at anything now. The juror is all of us on this, either denied on its face, meaning this argument, and in her opinion, this likely is going to be denied, but to alleviate concern for appeal, the judge could grant a hearing to question that juror so a future court does not reverse on you should have had a hearing. Next, the defense argument, the court allowed a finding of guilt on the conspiracy of only 2 out of the 5 people alleged in the indictment. Ms. Baden says if the government fails to prove 5 spokes of the classic bicycle wheel explanation, but shows barred, B-A-R-D. Now, what does that mean? Real quick, let me just tell you. So barred is the evidence standard used to determine legal guilt by a juror or a judge. The standard is known as proof beyond a reasonable doubt. That's what barred means. But she goes on to say, if the government fails to prove 5 spokes of the classic bicycle wheel explanation, but shows barred that 2 spokes of the bicycle wheel were in the conspiracy, even though the wheel has 5 spokes, that meets the burden of proof set forth in the indictment. So she thinks likely denied on its face. So one expert weighing in saying it's a nothing burger, and the defense attorneys are only doing their job. They're doing what they were appointed to do. Moving on, Bryan Kohberger. We know that Bryan Kohberger's parents were called to testify for an investigative grand jury about the murder of a woman named Dana Smithers who lived in Pennsylvania. She went missing a year ago yesterday, and her body was just found last month. not very far from where Bryan Kohberger lived and went to school. Stacey Ann Smithers is the sister of Dana, and she said there is no connection between her sister's murder and Bryan Kohberger. The Stroud Area Regional PD also released a statement saying pretty much the same. Now, Brian Ensign from News Nation tweeted out that Bryan Kohberger had a strong alibi for the night that she went missing. A lot of people are wondering, why would his parents be called in the first place if he wasn't a suspect? My theory is maybe they were part of the alibi and they went to testify as to that alibi. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know. It's just my brain working. But it just doesn't seem like Bryan Kohberger is the guy they're looking for or the woman they're looking for in this case, with both the sister and the police addressing any potential involvement, which according to both is none. So I just wanted to put that out there because I did talk about that last week. Now, the last thing we're going to talk about is a missing woman, Nikki Alcaraz, also known as Nikki Cunningham. This is very, very reminiscent to me to Gabby Petito. I'm going to leave this picture up during this part because it's important to get familiar with her face. There are several states she could be in, and she's 33 years old, a mother of two from Tennessee. She went on a cross-country road trip from Tennessee to Anaheim, California with her boyfriend, whose name is Tyler Stratton, in a black Jeep, which is here on the screen, and also a picture of Tyler and their dog that they took. Now, Tyler is currently wanted on an unrelated warrant for probation violation out of Tennessee for failure to appear. The charges that he was on probation for were for theft. Now, she's made this trip hundreds of times in the past, according to her sister, Tony, who last spoke with Nikki 3 weeks ago. Normally, they talk about every day, and obviously, she is worried something really bad has happened. Nikki's brother, Josh, said the trip normally takes her 2 days, so not hearing from her for 3 weeks is very worrisome. Now, here's where the worry really kicks in. On May 4th, while on their trip, there was a run-in with law enforcement in Torrance County, New Mexico. A witness saw Tyler punch Nikki in the face. Now, on this flyer that is here on the screen, you can see in the middle picture, there are bruises of her arm and she has a black eye. Tyler told police she hit him as well. He did have blood coming from his mouth and his nose. Both Nikki and Tyler declined to press charges, and Nikki was driven to Moriarty, New Mexico, separate from Tyler, and then she called her sister. Her sister, Tony, said Nikki was crying and upset. The black eye was visible, and she said she was beaten up pretty badly, and you can see from these photos she is very bruised up on her face and her arms. Nikki's brother told Fox 10 Phoenix that a truck driver had to pull Tyler off of Nikki, call the police, and then the police came and picked him up, took him a couple of exits down, and dropped him off. Nikki was diagnosed with a traumatic brain injury and a broken hand or wrist, according to her brother. So a family friend made the drive to New Mexico to be with Nikki, hoping that she would ride with them to California. The morning they were due to leave to go to California, she told the family friend she needed to go find Tyler because she had a bad feeling. The friend left without her and is believed to be the last person to have seen her alive. This was on May 6th of this year at 7 a.m. at a Super 8 motel in New Mexico, in Moriarty, New Mexico. That's about 40 miles east of Albuquerque, New Mexico. Now, 2 days later on May 8th, Tony and Nikki texted. Tony's the sister, and Nikki said she was in Arizona and was planning to still go visit her uncle in California. That was the last time that Tony heard from Nikki. As of right now, her phone is out of service, which is a huge red flag. Her sister says she doesn't think she's dead, but she does acknowledge it's possible at this point. She's worried either Nikki and Tyler had another fight that escalated, or potentially, are they broken down somewhere? Did they have an accident in the Jeep? She said all the news stories make it more terrifying as to what is possible. And Nikki's brother, Josh, said the worst case scenario is in the back of his mind, but he is trying to hold out hope. Her Jeep was scanned by a license plate reader in Flagstaff, Arizona on the 9th, which is the day that after she talked to her sister. So we know on the 9th that Jeep at least was seen in Flagstaff. So the DA in Tennessee, where Tyler is wanted out of, has requested a nationwide extradition for Tyler. Nikki is 5'6" with brown eyes and kind of black brownish hair. The Jeep is a 2013 Wrangler with the tag BGL3539. The Jeep has a sticker on the back that says Mama Tried, and the seats inside that Jeep are camouflage. Now, what makes this story even sadder is that the family has had a super traumatic year already, with a sibling passing away in January, and just last month, the family lost their grandfather. So anybody with information about Nikki should be directed to call the police at 505-832-6060 or 505-834-2705. So hopefully this has a happy ending. There have been times where people have been missing. It's just 3 weeks later, she has 2 children, and her sister said it's not like her to not check in. And we hear that so often in these domestic violence cases or just missing person cases. It's just uncharacteristic that they not reach out to people. So fingers crossed for a happy ending. I'm going to stay on top of this one, keep tweeting out some updates, and hope for a good end result, because you never know. Maybe we do get a good result with this. But all too often, we know how these stories end. By the way, Tyler, I'm assuming, has not been seen from anything that I've seen, but he is wanted for that extradition back to Tennessee on those unrelated charges. So I'm going to keep you guys up to date on that. I'm heading out to a family cookout here. I will see you tomorrow. Tomorrow we are diving in Letitia Stout. We're going to try to do about 2 to 3 days at a time to kind of get through just the facts of the case, since that happened at the same time as Lori's. But I do want to conclude that. Very important to tell Gannon's story as well, and the facts of what happened to him. So anyways, all right, guys, we'll see you tomorrow. I hope you have a good one. All right, I'm out.